They got 10,000 subscribers in the first 2 days.
Paid subscribers.
Paid subscribers.
Wow.
Paying $10 a month. So that is, $1 million.
Hello, my friend. Welcome back to another episode of Creative Elements. Most weeks on this show, I'm speaking to an individual creator about their individual path. But sometimes I have the opportunity to talk to somebody who has a bird's eye view of what a lot of creators are doing at the same time. And so through their lens, through them, we're able to learn something that applies to us too. And that is the case for today's guest, Jason Su Hoy, the co-founder and CEO of Supercast. Supercast is a podcast subscription platform that helps podcasters, networks, and publishers earn money directly from their listeners. The top 10 podcasters on Supercast earn more than $12 million directly from their listeners. Now, Jason has a background in computer science. That's what he graduated university with. But after graduation, he took a slightly different path than you might expect.
Coming out of university, I joined a multinational called Unisys and was asked, do you want to go down the engineering route or do you want to go down kind of more the business route? And I chose business because I had wider interests. And from very early on, at school, I studied some accounting, did some accounting papers. I did some, kind of like genetics and biotech papers. So I had broader interests.
Exploring those interests served Jason well. He started working at a company that gave him an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to lead. And that opportunity led to an even bigger opportunity.
And I joined a company called SitePoint to lead an agency division as the GM within that business. I took that role thinking, okay, well, I know how to lead an agency. I know how to do tech sales, but there is something else going on at this kind of like SitePoint business. And surely something will come of it.
What came after, as you'll soon hear, is the creation of 99 Designs, a global design marketplace. 99 Designs has had a lot of success. They have more than 1.6 million designers on the platform. And if you've heard of 99 Designs, you just may have heard of them on a podcast. They were early on in podcast advertising, and they advertised a lot on the Tim Ferris show in particular.
I myself, became an avid Tim Ferris listener, and I started adopting his workout regime, and I started adopting, the low carb diet. And, before I knew it, I had spent, tens and hundreds of hours, kind of like listening to his content and just, felt that draw, that influence that, someone like that can have on your life when you really tune into it, to a podcast.
That started Jason down the path of studying podcasting. So in this episode, we talk about Jason's path to Supercast, when a premium podcast subscription makes sense, what type of incentives to create to get someone to pay for a podcast, and why none of this is possible without experimentation. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode as you listen. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at @jclouse, or leave a comment on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not already. That's enough of me. Let's talk with Jason.
But the reason I joined SitePoint is because they had so many other interesting things going on the side. They had a publishing division. They were producing all of these books. They had partnerships with O'Reilly, for example, and they were creating all of these books and tutorials around like how to build your first website with PHP and MySQL. So that was pretty interesting. But then they also had this forum with, I think at the time, like when I looked at the website of sitepoint.com, it had this forum and it said 874,336 members, subscribers. And I was like, what is that? And so I dived into it. And in this forum, there was just like this sprawling community of web developers and web designers who were just trying to figure out ways to be better at their craft. They were in there, on a daily basis, talking to each other and just challenging each other and sharing information. That forum was actually pivotal to a number of different businesses that would spin out of the wider SitePoint umbrella. The way 99 Designs came about is that within this kind of like really organic forum, designers in one particular forum thread just started competing against each other to prove who was the better designer.
Oh.
So it was just like this really fun way for them to level up their skills, challenge each other, and just play around with tools. So one designer would come up with a fictional brief, and post it and say, hey, how about we design brochures these days for a grocery company? And the other designers, 2 or 3 would battle it out. And there would be various forms. They called it Photoshop tennis at one stage where, basically you would pass around a file and see who could, make it better in different ways. And along came one day this person who said, look, I'm a web designer. I design websites, but one of my clients has asked me for a logo. I don't do logos. Here's the brief. I'll put up $100 and whoever can design me the best logo gets the money.
Wow.
And so these designers loved it. Like that, all of a sudden, they were kind of like being offered money for something that they were doing for fun anyway. So this little forum thread just started to blow up as a way to get, lots of creative ideas for things like logos in a really affordable way and in a way that, just flipped the traditional design model on its head. You didn't have to try to pick a designer based on their portfolio, it was just, kind of like, show me what you got. And so it started, all this organic traffic started coming to this forum thread. And so before we even knew the term MVP, minimum viable product, what we did at SitePoint was just to say, well, maybe there's a business here, and so the first step was simply to lock that forum thread. So we locked that forum thread and made it $10 to post a job, a request into that thread and thought, well, this will probably kill it. But it didn't kill it. It just validated that all of a sudden this was a place to actually go and get design, and it started, accelerating even more. So we doubled the price to $20. And more people came, now businesses were coming wanting, actual assets created. And so, several more steps later, it was clear that this was a separate business opportunity. And so that forum thread became a tab on SitePoint. So it became like SitePoint Design Contests. And then the next iteration was to split it out as its own separate brand. And that's when it became 99designs.com.
Wild. And at that point, did you jump in as the executive in charge of operating that business? So
basically, I'd been at SitePoint for 3 months. The founder had just decided, okay, this is a real thing. I need to build a team around it. He knows, he's very self-aware of his skill sets and what gets him interested. He knows that once something gets to about 4 or 5 people, he's got to find someone else to run the business because he starts to kind of lose it with managing projects and all that sort of stuff. It's just not his bag. That's when I came on board basically as the GM, COO of the business. It was a wild ride. I was at 99 Designs for over a decade, multiple kind of business lines and opportunities within that, expanded the team, from just being bootstrapped for the first 3 years, predominantly based in Australia, to having a big presence in California, and then also Berlin, raising venture funding with Excel Partners 3 years in, and then ultimately leading to an acquisition by Vistaprint just a couple of years ago.
That's amazing. I would have never guessed that was the origin story for 99 Designs, that it evolved organically out of this forum as friendly competition that people were having with each other just for fun and for competition. That's so interesting that you noticed that it evolved. I mean, this is really talking to the power of community, which I'm sure we'll talk about here soon. But to notice that evolving and then say, there's something here, let's play around with this and see where it could lead. Just fascinating origin story.
Right.
Here's a question that I don't get to ask a lot of people, but I feel like you would have some unique insight into. I feel a lot of tension between the identity phrases of creative, as in a creative, and creators. Today with Supercast, you work with a lot of creators. 99 Designs probably felt more like creatives in, the early 2010s. How do you think about those two words? Are those two different types of people to you? Because to me, it kind of seems like they might be, but it's hard for me to differentiate.
There is a way of looking at creatives that says, hey, you come up with a brief, or you give them, tell them a little bit about their business, and they go wild with their creative ideas, and they throw you a whole lot of stuff that you in no way could have done on your own. And, you contribute to the process, and you come out, with a logo that just looks, incredible. That's one way of thinking about a creative. But even within that spectrum at 99 Designs, there's the whole range of, kind of creatives within that umbrella. So you get people that are more that artist type, sure, they will get some inspiration from the business that you have, your business name, etc. But then, they're more towards the Michelangelo end of the spectrum, right? Where they will come up with something incredible. that might fit your needs or might not fit your needs, and you might be able to bend them or you might not be able to bend them, and they're somewhat like set in kind of like how much inspiration they'll let you kind of like play. At the other end of the spectrum, there are the people that are just great at like graphic design execution. Like they're not really, like gonna come up with the, kind of artistic flair, but what they'll do is that, they're really good at, kind of pumping out iterations and executions and, like more or less coming up with, like what you're asking for, visualized, in kind of the form that you need it. I think now that we think about, kind of like broadening out from like graphic design and all of the places that a creator can, kind of exist on the internet, the term creator, I think, like broadens significantly. And in the context of podcasters, it's just, a lot looser of a term. Anybody that, is basically creating content these days, we bring under the umbrella of creator. Writers, podcasters, etc. And I guess to your point, is an interviewer of an interview style podcast. Like, do you think about them as a creative in that same sense? I think of it these days as like somebody that is creating content, and so I think it's like less connected to kind of like the purest art form of a particular medium.
Yeah, it's weird. But I think about it a lot just because my target audience are people who identify as creators. And what I find there are a lot of people who identify as creatives that don't quite identify as a creator. They don't know what that term really means, but it's kind of like a rectangle square situation in my experience, where creators identify also as creatives, but not all creatives identify as creators. But at the end of the day, whatever somebody identifies with as a creative or creator, they're making things. Mm-hmm. They're solving problems with their creativity. They're making something, whether it's for one individual as a client or for an audience or for hopeful mass appeal. It's just interesting. I think the term creator is still in its infancy a little bit, and people are becoming more aware of it, more accustomed to it, warming up to it maybe. Yeah, it's an interesting struggle that I have with a show called Creative Elements serving creators.
And I think it also, like has just opened up dramatically with how easy it is to create content, on the internet these days, right? I mean, like anybody can fire up TikTok or whatever and start becoming a creator, right? Just by virtue of the fact that they're putting content out into the world. So it makes sense that, some of these terms are looser than we originally designed them for.
After a quick break, Jason and I talk about why he believes so deeply in podcasts and the opportunity for podcasters to earn money directly from their listeners. And later, we talk about the economics and incentives for creating a compelling premium podcast feed. So stick around and we'll be right back. Hey, thanks for watching Creative Elements. This is a brand new channel here on YouTube, so liking the videos, leaving comments, subscribing to the channel, sharing the show, all that support goes a long, long way right now. It is all seen, it is all appreciated. And even though this is a brand new channel here on YouTube, I've actually been conducting interviews with creators just like this for more than 2 years. There are more than 100 interviews that you can go back and listen to with creators like Seth Godin, James Clear, Cody Sanchez, Tori Dunlap, even YouTubers like Ali Abdaal, Matt Diavella, Roberto Blake, and Marie Poulin. I've actually created some playlists for you to help get you started, to dive into some of the best episodes that we've done to date. Just go to creativeelements.fm/playlists. The link is also down below in the description, but you can filter episodes there by platform or medium. If you want to just look at episodes with YouTubers or just episodes with Instagrammers, you can do that with those starter playlists at creativeelements.fm/playlists. And again, the link is down below in the description. Welcome back to my conversation with Jason Su Hoy. Jason has been building Supercast for the last 3 years, and to dedicate 3 years of your life to podcasts means that you probably have a deep love of the medium. So I asked Jason where his appreciation for podcasts came from.
About halfway through the 99 Designs journey, actually probably even earlier, this guy by the name of Tim Ferris he came into contact with 99 Designs, and he expressed a frustration that the designers at his publishing company that were working on his second book just, weren't hitting it out of the park with the cover design concepts that they were sending him to him. And so he wanted to use the platform 99 Designs to come up with some better designs and, really throw it out to the creative community. And so we worked with Tim to do that. And, that's how the cover design for the 4-hour body actually came about. But then, sometime after that, Tim decided to launch a podcast. When he did, shortly after, he said he turned around to us, and having worked with us before, and knowing that, we, our core customer base was kind of, entrepreneurs and people that were starting things, he asked us whether we would come on board as the first sponsor. And so we leapt at the chance. And that show, has become has been, since we started, one of the most wonderful acquisition channels for new people launching, design projects on 99 Designs for a number of different reasons. Tim is Tim. I think basically anything that he recommends, his audience.
I think he refers to it as the hug of death. Actually,
right. And the second thing is, but the fact that he had used the service meant that his read, his endorsement for 99 Designs was just so authentic. He would talk about, basically all the cover designs, flying in and it feeling like, kind of Christmas every time, and just so much creativity. And so, number one, it generated great business for us, so that was, where I experienced, just the intimate connection that a host can have, with their listener base in terms of providing those recommendations. And so that was my first experience with, podcasting as a medium. And then towards the end of my time at 99 Designs, I got talking to Andrew Wilkinson, who heads a group called Tiny up in Canada, but basically a family of, internet companies, some of which, started in the design world. So MetaLab, for example, prolific design agency, Dribble, huge design network, just a whole bunch of other, wonderful companies as well. And he'd started working with Sam Harris, and Sam Harris had built up a big Patreon, but then, just basically decided, that was too clunky, an experience for most of his subscriber base. They were going from listening to his podcast, loving his content, wanting more bonus content, and being willing to pay, but then kind of stuck in this experience where they were signing up for a Patreon account. And then, after having done so, looking at a wall that resembled Facebook, as opposed to just wanting to listen to more content, and being in the podcast world. And so Sam wanted us to build, basically the founding team of Supercast, to build his own bespoke solution. And we did so and launched it to, enormous success. And in doing so, got a front seat to, just how, kind of how much money a podcast membership can generate, a podcast subscription can generate. And it resembles, the metrics resemble a great software business. And that's what kind of blew our minds. And we thought, wow, is this just Sam's audience, or is this something that, is more widely applicable? And so we worked with a couple of other podcasters, Peter Attia in the health and longevity space, and Rhonda Patrick also. And she talks a lot about saunas and basically deconstructing and keeping up to date with the latest in science and health research, to bring that, to into layman's terms, and how we can live healthier lives. And their audiences both blew up as well in terms of their memberships, and just transformed their ability to do more research and create more incredible content for their communities.
When you say that Sam's podcast on Supercast, the premium version, launched a tremendous success, can you quantify tremendous success a little bit to give people a taste of what is possible?
Sam was the precursor to Supercast. So that was him paying us on an agency basis to build out a subscription solution, which, Sam, owns and runs himself. But, since Sam, a number of customers have launched on Supercast. And so the example that I will give, because I know they're happy to meet with me to, share these numbers, is Breaking Points. And so Breaking Points the precursor to Breaking Points was a show called Rising on the Hill, which is a, DC media outlet. Crystal and Saga are the co-hosts of of the Rising, sorry. And they decided, that they would go independent from the Hill and start their own show called Breaking Points, which launched in June of last year. So nearly a year. They were going to be basically starting from zero. It would be a brand new YouTube channel, a brand new podcast. They'd never done a podcast before, but they had, kind of like built, kind of Instagrams and YouTubes. And they would power that all with a Supercast subscription. So you might find them on YouTube, you might find them on a podcast, but either way, to get, kind of early access to the show, you would sign up on Supercast and you could consume that either in like video or audio form. And so when I say, like they launched to tremendous success, they got 10,000 subscribers in the first 2 days.
Paid subscribers.
Paid subscribers.
Wow.
Paying $10 a month. So that is, $1 million, like, in terms of like annual revenue, like straight off the bat, which blew their mind. Like that, they did not anticipate that whatsoever. Like when we had kind of like kicked around ideas and projections and estimates and things like that, we'd kind of like modeled it out and thought, okay, well, we might get that, like at the end of the first year. Honestly, like it was just, wild seeing all that number of subscriptions flowing in, like within the first 2 days. 40% of those paid annually, so they paid $100 up front as opposed to the $10 monthly. And then they actually included a lifetime membership option as well for $1,500. Like $1,500 is a one-off payment. Mm-hmm. And I think at this point, over 700 people have paid that for that lifetime membership.
That's crazy. So 700 people expect that they would be annual members for more than 15 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's a lot of trust in the creator. We're so early in this creator economy. There aren't that many people that have been doing any type of creator business for 15 years.
Right. So I actually think it's that particular part of it. I think it's less about the, kind of like sizing up. Am I going to be a member for 20 years?
It's not the pure like financial side of it. It's them saying like, I get so much value out of this that I want to support you in this way.
It's exactly, it's mission. It's so there and like to explain a little bit about, kind of like why that took off the way they did. They've really zeroed in on who their audience is. The makeup of, Crystal and Saga is that from a political point of view, Saga is on the right, Crystal's on the left. In any given show, so they publish 3 times a week in the mornings, and it's news and it's politics, and it looks a lot like a cable news show. And, they very specifically went after that so that, you or I, for example, if we were sending a clip to our parents and saying, hey, look at this, I told you inflation was going to be going up, like our parents wouldn't dismiss it because it looks like a YouTube show. It looks super professional. Saga put a lot of money into designing his desk, his Perspex desk there. And because they bring, kind of that diversity of viewpoint, people really value the debate, which is often missing in mainstream media. And of course, if you look at charts of trust in mainstream media, it's fallen to all-time lows, like from a, kind of widespread population point of view. And so that's what Crystal and Saga really zeroed in on. And they said, like basically we want our boss to be our audience. We don't want to be at the whim of, corporate sponsors and all that sort of stuff. We don't want to be biased, and we want to bring you, that unbiased perspective. And so they really kind of like brought the listeners into supporting that mission. And that is what I think has really resonated with people.
I'm looking at some of the things they're promising here. So they have ad-free uncut. So it's like the ad-free version of the show, it sounds like. Then they have exclusive reactions to each other's monologues.
Right.
Weekly access to a premium-only Ask Me Anything episode. Twice monthly exclusive long-form discussions. That's a lot of things. Is that typical for Supercast users that are doing well to be offering 5 different perks to their premium members? Or do you see people offering fewer things? Because I think a lot of the people who consider this, one of the big concerns they have is, can I sustain whatever it is that I need to promise to get people to follow through on purchasing a membership?
Yeah, it's probably the biggest concern of creators, and it's very fair concern. And what we try to do, being the kind of like the platform that supports creators, is just to work out, like how we can guide them to not overcommit. Like the last thing we want them to do is like to have to double their creative workload. So that's why we're built out, like to give you a, kind of like direct answer, we look for opportunities, again, with that curiosity to build certain things to make it easier. So the AMAs, for example, that is powered by a specific function on Supercast. We have an AMA portal, basically a page where as soon as someone becomes a member, they can submit questions. It'll, kind of auto-suggest questions that are already been asked. They can upvote other people's questions instead. And then as a creator, when you come to do those AMA episodes once a week, once every 2 weeks, you just kind of like pick out 3 or 4 that you want to answer, record one episode, and then you can timestamp where the answers appear, so that there's basically a workflow, and it's not too much logistically for you to manage.
So for folks who are using this Q&A feature, are they making that episode only available to listen to for paid subscribers, or is it sometimes used as, hey, paid subscribers can ask the questions, we release that episode for anybody to listen to?
There is a trick, basically to fueling the growth of your community, where you use some of your premium content as teasers on your public feed. And so people like Sam Harris, people like Peter Attia, they do this extraordinarily well. And so what you do is you record an AMA episode. Let's call it, say AMA episode number 30. And you choose, of course, which 5 questions you want to answer. And say you spend an hour answering those questions. What you would do is you would put that on the private feed on Supercast, so that, all of the members get that immediately. And also all of the people that upvoted or asked a question would get email notified saying, hey, your question's been answered. But then you can also take the first, say, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you choose, and put a snippet of that onto your public feed to give people a taste of, like what they would be getting if they were a premium member. And then, kind of like cutting, obviously, when the teaser finishes with a call to subscribe to the premium feed to be able to ask your own questions or to be able to, to continue listening. I think that's a really, really important point, because it also applies to a lot of, what you just listed out on the breaking points page. Some of those 5 things that you mentioned are actually not that difficult. They're not, a ton of extra work. And the important thing is that they also provide a teaser of an opportunity to subscribe organically that doesn't feel like an ad. And so to be more specific about that, the second point was the reaction to each other's monologues. And again, this is something that Crystal and Saga, that was their idea. Like they really paid attention to what their audience values about the show. And the fact that there's 2 hosts, what happens is each of them in every episode presents a monologue. So Saga, for example, might do a 5-minute segment on GameStop. Everyone's wondering what's going on with GameStop, and he will do a 5-minute monologue deconstructing all of that. And then after the monologue, he'll turn to Crystal and say, okay, so what do you think, Crystal? And so that's where you get, kind of the debate on the show, right? And at that point on the public feed is when it cuts off and it says,
but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.
Yes, you are missing out on a bit that, you would have loved. But, you have to have that little bit of tension there. You have to have that healthy tension of, oh, this is something, like I really wanted to hear, as well as, like the way to get it so that in every single episode, you remind people, like why they should sign up.
When we come back, Jason and I talk about the economics and incentives for offering a paid podcast subscription and when you should start considering offering one for your listeners. So stick around and we'll be right back. I'm thrilled to say that this episode is sponsored by Circle. Circle is an all-in-one membership community for creators and brands. It brings together engaging discussions, members, live streams, chats, events, and memberships all in one place, all under your brand. And Circle is what I use to run my own membership community. I love Circle because it has a clean, minimal design, and it's built with creators like you and I in mind. It's so easy to use, people love it, and it's easy for me to manage as a creator myself. I'm having so much fun supporting creators inside my membership, and it's become a huge part of my overall business. You can also easily create immersive live video experiences right inside of your Circle community. Whether it's a 5-person group coaching call, a 50-person online class, or a 500-person broadcast with Q&A, Circle has you covered. If you're interested in testing out Circle for your own community, you can start your 14-day free trial by going to creativeelements.fm/circle. That's creativeelements.fm/circle, or visit the link down below in the description. Hey, welcome back. Over the last couple of years, I've thought about offering a premium subscription for listeners of this show. But my hang-up has been, what am I providing those premium subscribers every week? Now, the obvious answer is an ad-free feed. So I asked Jason if offering an ad-free feed is enough to attract paid subscribers.
So, I think about these things in the context of conversion rate, and ultimately that means, if you have 10,000 listeners per episode, how many of those, can you get over to being paid subscribers? And so, just to really, I guess, explain the model, we don't really have anybody that just slams the paywall down hard and says, okay, this is not going to be a free podcast anymore. Like, you need to pay, to listen to anything. And we certainly wouldn't recommend that either, because, the free podcast, one, this is what you built to date, and this is what listeners are coming for. And then secondly, it's also the top of your funnel. It's how you continue to grow both your free and your paid audience in future. So it'd be short-sighted, to slam the paywall down. But rather, we think about this idea of, what if 5% of your audience were to pay you $10 a month? What if 5% of your audience would pay you $10 a month? And that gets at a few things, it's a monthly subscription, but, it's really for the 1,000 true fans, to quote Kevin Kelly's, model. And it means that 95% of your audience can still just enjoy your content for free. Maybe they're still trying it out. Maybe they just discovered it today. Or maybe, they just can't afford it and are okay, listening to the free content. But for the people that do love you and want to support you or want to get that extra bonus stuff, they have the ability to upgrade themselves, into that higher paying thing where you're earning a much, much better return than even, kind of like advertising CPM rates.
Is 5% the bar that you give people to shoot for or expect when they put in place a premium feed?
So we generally quote between 2 and 7%. The way I couch it is, and going back to your original question, if you do the easy lift stuff like ad-free, like early access, for example, maybe, restricting access to your back catalog, I would anticipate, if you just have one or a couple of those things, you would be, maybe even 1%, 1% conversion rate, 1 to 2%. So it would be at the bottom end of that spectrum. But as you start to overlay bonus episodes, AMAs, maybe access to a private Slack community, Circle community, Slack group, paid newsletter. So within Supercast, we've also built in the functionality to send out email newsletters, to your subscriber group as well. As you start to overlay some of these other additional things, that's when you can push up into the higher, kind of 5-7% range. We've looked at our top 20 on Supercast, our top 20 biggest audiences, subscriptions. And those creators are averaging right on 5%. So that's where I get the number from. Obviously, they've been at it a while. Anybody launching today, is not going to achieve that in the first month. But it gives you a sense of what's possible. And moreover, the top 10 creators on Supercast are grossing over $12 million in aggregate per year through subscriptions alone. So when you get it right, this is obviously, a very, very lucrative revenue generator for a podcast business.
Talk to me about the teams of some of the creators you support. I would imagine, those top 10 creators probably already had a team in place before they were doing a premium feed. And so they might even have some capacity to help with the operations of this type of thing. What proportion of your users are independent podcasters that are able to support this themselves, or maybe a part-time assistant? Do you have any data on that?
I mean, anecdotally, because I know, some of them pretty well, certainly they've pushed beyond, them being an individual person in those cases. I mean, it's still an independent person in most cases doing the podcast itself, doing the interviews and so on. But in a lot of cases, they have someone else, producing, doing all the sound stuff, producing the episodes. And they might have someone else, basically being a community person, depending on, how big the paying membership is. So, I would say they are smallish teams still. It would still be within the realms of, like 2 to 4 people. And then, the rest of the organization really depends on, like what kind of business they are around that. So Rhonda Patrick or Peter Attia, for example, they might have, people that are doing research or, like digesting scientific articles to like, kind of come up with the content that ultimately gets surfaced on the podcast and other mediums as well.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of a lot of my listeners tend to be earlier in their creator journey. And if they are podcasters, they ask me about ads a lot. And how big they need to be for ads. And I explain, well, it depends on what you're talking about. Like if you're doing a CPM model, which is cost per Mila, which is cost per 1,000 impressions, the bar is a lot higher. You can still do direct sales and do baked in ads and make good money below that bar. And I think that having a membership is attractive to that audience as well as somebody who's more advanced and realizes there's a stream of revenue here I could turn on. And so for the folks who are earlier stage, who feel like they aren't quite big enough to play the CPM game, but they've been podcasting for a while, I'm trying to identify when a membership program and feed like this might make sense. Is there still a download threshold? Is it about the length of time you've been podcasting and build up trust with those listeners? What do you think for that type of creator?
Get this question all the time. And generally the way that I think about it is less about overall size. So, there's no arbitrary cutoffs, which is, like kind of a good thing. And I first want to say, I just want to dispel this idea that, like it has to be one or the other in terms of advertising or subscription. And actually the way, we talked about ad free, hopefully it's obvious, like that the presence of ads creates the opportunity, to create an ad-free premium feed, or that is a benefit. So the two can actually work wonderfully well together. And then you have, kind of a great business that, has two, great revenue streams. And a lot of our top 10, like have the two, which, just stands them in really good stead. But as it relates to, like size specifically for the podcast, I like to think of it, we talked about that idea of like a minimum viable product, in startup world, there's another concept called product market fit, which is, how do you know when your startup, has kind of like got something that's ready to scale, like you've discovered something that people actually like, that people actually will pay for. And, like you can start to hire a bigger team around because it's, all the signs are there that it's going to take off. And so I think similarly, there's this, I like to think about this idea of like podcast market fit. There are markets out there and you're creating a podcast. How do you know that you've captured people's attention and that, like they're tuning in on a repeat basis and it's going to grow over time? So, the way I kind of think about it, like if you're producing episode after episode after episode and the numbers are they're not growing, like maybe you're getting like 80 downloads an episode and it seems like, you've tried a bunch of things and it just doesn't get past 80, then I think you're way too early to start thinking about monetization of any form. I think that's just a distraction from what you should be really focused on, which is getting that podcast market fit. It's like, okay, change it up, change up the distribution, change up, the content format. You want to find something that hits with your audience. And when you will know, like when it starts to grow and it, like you continue to put out episodes and, like you're pleasantly surprised every time you go back and check into, like your analytics dashboard that, like you're getting, more downloads and it feels like you're onto something, like at that point, like I think that's when you can start to think about, okay, well, how could I experiment with giving people a premium experience that they can opt in for. And also you'll know it because people will be asking people will be emailing you, be asking for other things. They'll be asking, like, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing that? And those are good signs that you have, good retention and good engagement. And that is, basically the underpinnings, I think, of the true fan model. It's like you want to find the core 10, 100,000 people, like that, just want to see you succeed and they've made you a part, of their kind of like regular habits. And, beyond that, it's really, like at what point do the numbers become meaningful to you? So let's say you had, 1,000 downloads per episode. or let's call it 10,000, for easy maths, 10,000 downloads per episode. Like if you had 5%, then that's, 500 premium members, like paying $10 a month. That's, $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year. Does $60,000 a year for that creative effort where you've got 10,000 downloads per episode, is that meaningful to you as an incremental revenue stream that also in turn, draws you closer to your community? Obviously, you can play those numbers up and down. If it was only $5 a month you're charging, that's $30,000 a year. But I think most creators would agree that, just it gives you optionality. We just talked about building out a team, like 30,000, 60,000, that can get you a lot, of services, that all of a sudden you don't have to be doing and means that you can free up some time to focus on growth or, more content or, whatever it is. So the return piece, once you've got the fit, and you feel like the engagement's there, the return piece and whether it's worth it and finding, kind of like the secret, like the secret formula or the right formula for you in terms of like effort invested to returns, it is just, a matter of like basically testing your way into it and then seeing, how you build that over time.
We mentioned these kind of in passing, but I want to explicitly list out some of the most popular value propositions that you're seeing with your creators on the platform. We had ad-free feeds. We had listener Q&A functionality. Mm-hmm. We had bonus episodes. What else did you mention there?
I'll divide this into two camps. So I'll start with like the easy lift stuff. So kind of like repackaging existing content. You can kind of like think of it that way. So ad-free is one of them. You just take out the ads, pretty easy. Early access. So again, it just means that you might be giving episodes. So Shane Parrish of the Knowledge Project, for example, he's done this a few times. He did an interview with Bill Ackman, and he said, hey, just did an incredible interview with Bill. Premium members, get this 2 weeks early. Similarly, like binge access, if you're doing a series, if you've got a series of content, being able to binge that all as opposed to like waiting, every single week for a new episode to drop, like it's a really kind of like cool neat idea that again, just makes use of windowing, right? It's just time. Extended interviews. So, think about this interview that we're doing right now. Imagine if like you saved, like 3 or 4 questions for, kind of like a behind the scenes or, the extended portion of our interview. Or similarly, like in post-production, you were to just chop out one segment of our conversation and then say, hey, if you want to hear, Jason talked about, what aspects of a premium subscription, like convert the best, then, sign up to a premium member. And so you chop that 5 minutes out and it gives you, again, that organic opportunity to say, like, this is what you're missing out on, and so, there's a whole lot of tricks there. Back catalog access. So a lot of people, if you've done, hundreds of episodes, it often gets to a point where a public feed becomes a little bit too unwieldy anyway to have, like all of those episodes. So you can start to remove, there's quite a few podcasters that after 6 months, they take episodes off the back and put it into their premium collection. So that's kind of repackaging. And then on the new content side, the bonus content side, you could have interviews with VIP guests that, you only get as a premium subscriber. You could have AMAs where you're, answering questions. You could have newsletter content, for example, where you get access to written form stuff, as well as, the podcast, and then access to a community is another popular one. So that's where you're kind of like changing the dynamic a little bit from being, hey, I'm paying for just access to you as the host to I'm paying to access to other people that, also share my passion. So there's a customer we have, a podcast by the name of Reality Cray Cray, that springs out as an example here. They have this, they all they do is cover the show 90 Day Fiancé, the reality show. It's kind of like a post-episode, kind of commentary show. They don't even use their real names. They use pseudonyms, because of yeah, exactly, the nature of the content. He works in tech, or he did work in tech. Kyle, as a pseudonym goes. We've interviewed him on our podcast, Supercasters, and he tells a story about, how he works in tech. He's always had, like great jobs, like that he's really, really enjoyed, really, really, really fulfilled. But then he's podcasting under the pseudonym with this community and creating a Facebook group where he's got over 5,000 people, probably, 6 or 7 now, where people just love the show and they now, they're just talking about their hobbies, sharing pictures of their children, just really expanding beyond the premise of, the show itself. So much so that he's quit his career in tech and gone all in, on being a podcaster for this show. It's, just an incredible story. That's another one where you're creating, kind of brand new content, but it doesn't necessarily need to be you, leading everything from the front.
How do I think about pricing this thing? Not even just the price, but does it need to be monthly? Can it be annual only? How would you recommend people start thinking about that?
So I'm going to leverage that framework that I painted out before in terms of like the easy stuff and then kind of like the bonus stuff. So in the same way that, I think about like conversion rates being that 2 to 7% range, if you're doing the easier stuff, ad free, so on, then I wouldn't go above $5. I keep it $5 and, kind of see how that resonates with your audience. As you layer on the bonus content, that's where you push up into the $10, $15 a month range, and we have a lot of our podcasters, like charging, at that, kind of the premium end of the spectrum. So I would say in most cases, podcasters undersell themselves. I see on Patreon, for example, people that are kind of like doing $1 tiers, $2 tiers. I honestly don't like to see that because that sets too low a floor. And really, I feel like most creators, are just not valuing their time and their content highly enough, when they do that. Which then has a flow-on effect, to how listeners perceive, the value of your content. So that's how I think about the price. And then, going back to, what we were talking about before, really both price and conversion rate, again, it's not, I wouldn't think about it so much like in terms of like how long you've been doing it or how big your audience is, because we have some audiences that are, call it the $5,000 downloads per episode, so not huge pods, but they are converting at like 50%. I'm not kidding you. Like they're converting at 50% on I'm pretty sure it's a $10 price point. Wow. So I'm not going to say that's everyone. I'm not going to say that that's typical, but I'm going to say that it's possible. Like if you have the right fit, if you get your kind of like the strategy down and, a message and a good read that articulates the value of what you're doing and, how, listeners can kind of like get access to the premium content, then the numbers can work in your favor.
Do you have any data to suggest that it makes sense to offer monthly? And I ask that because in the community world, I'm seeing more and more of a trend to moving away from monthly recurring and just doing biannual or annual pricing. And I wonder what your reaction to that is in a premium podcast feed world.
Where an annual plan is offered, and often it's offered with, kind of a couple of months free. So, it's like $10 per month or $100 a year, let's say, which, essentially saves you $20 on the annual. We would see about 40% uptake on the annual, 40 to 50% uptake, which
seems pretty high.
It's high. It's higher than I was expecting, or that I would have, expected prior to rolling any of those out. I think for a podcast, it's high because people have already had a taste of what your content is. Like in most cases, they've been listening for a while now to your free podcast. And so they're bought in on your mission. They're bought in on who you are. They know that they love your content. They know that they're going to love all of the bonuses. And therefore, when they're presented with the option, are you going to be listening to this for a year? Yeah. Like I've been listening to 2 years already, So at that point, it's a fairly easy decision for them to say, yeah, okay, I'll save a bit. No, I want to support Jay. So I think we see a higher proportion of the annual, but most people that we have would still offer the option of a monthly.
I think this is a really good look at how and when podcasters might want to offer a premium subscription to their subscribers. If you want to learn more about Supercast and how you can do just that, go to supercast.com. Thanks to Jason for being on the show. Thank you to Connor Conboy for editing this episode and Nathan Todhunter for mixing the audio. Thank you to Brian Skeel for creating our music and Emily Clouse for making the podcast artwork. I'd love to hear what you think about this episode. You can tweet at me at jclouse. Let me know. Leave a comment here on YouTube and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next week.